Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm wearing these headphones, so hopefully that'll take care of any background noise. But I wanted to pick up on a topic that I touched on in my last video around selling artwork. And it has to do with a conversation I had with a women's group around selling artwork when trying to move abroad. And what was striking about the conversation was, essentially people's ideas about the market and what artists are hot and what artists essentially could be flipped, right? for a good profit, right, or a good value, and me having to break down, the difference between price and value and the word sales, etc. But really, most importantly, what venues are available to collectors to sell their artwork, and sell their artwork in a timely time period, because most people who are moving abroad, maybe they may need some of that money from the sale of their artwork to support the expenses around moving abroad, or maybe they will need that money to support their lifestyle abroad. So, there's all kinds of, essentially, some pressures around the sale of that artwork. Do they have the right artist who will sell well and sell quickly, right? And what will be the time period, like the timeline around that? So I'm going to touch on a couple of those issues and more, and then essentially identify how I can be helpful in that process, because honestly, that's a question I get very, very often. When there's a message on my phone, on my landline, that message is around, I got something, I inherited something, and I want to sell it. Because, it's not my taste. Sometimes there's a lot of it, a whole lot of it. And they need assistance in sorting through the materials and getting a valuation, but their intention always is around sell, 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 sell. And there are some instances where you would need me, and there are other instances where I really don't need to be a part of the process, because your intention is to sell. And, sales really is around willing buyer, willing seller. And there's some nuances to that, but willing buyer, willing seller, and what's agreed upon between the two parties. Anywho, so in this conversation about folks who are moving abroad, or for that matter, even people who are doing estate management work, right? Their loved one has died, and there's a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff in the house. What do they do with it? One of the important things, and I have to remind myself to get back to this, is, it's important to do an inventory as much as you possibly can of what you have, so that when you talk to a professional like myself, you're able to describe the objects that are in your possession to the best of your ability. You can do your super preliminary Googles, that's fine. But, just get a sense of how many works, the types of works, the materials of those works, the conditions of those works, like that kind of information. Yeah, and clearly if you're in possession of any invoices, any kind of backup materials around how the works were acquired, even, oral history lore, I'll take that. But any information you have around how the works are acquired is really, really important, because that kind of tells me which market level and which market layer those works can be identified with. And that is really super important around resale, okay? So, also around authentication as well. So it's important, if you can have that information available for me, that would be terrific. So in terms of the different venues where collectors can sell works, they can sell at auction. They can work through like the dealer system. That could be an antique dealer, it can be an art dealer, it can be someone who works in decorative arts, what have you. But someone who works at the commercial level, commercial retail level of selling art. So that's one other person. And of course, you can also sell it yourself, right? You can sell it yourself, and that's eBay and Etsy and Cherish and other kinds of online platforms like that. Okay, an important thing that came up in the conversation with those folks who were moving abroad, I emphasize strongly knowing whether your artist is listed or not. Now, this is a really big deal. Many years ago, when I was working, I continue to work with them, working with the auction houses. They really need, they were focusing on, is this a listed artist or not? And so the auction houses would go to askart.com and look up and see if this artist is listed. Okay. And at the time, if it wasn't a listed artist, I guess they saw no value in putting that object up for auction. And, they have a certain criteria that they're looking at. They are in business to make money. Let's be clear. So, they need those artworks to hit a particular price level, right? Before agreeing to take them on under consignment for sale at auction. So, works that are below 300 for some auction houses, or before 500, below 500 for other auction houses, that is a part of the criteria that they look at. Now, some auction houses go below those amounts. Some maybe higher. It all depends on who you're in conversation with. But that is to say, you're trying to make the right fit, right? The right seller, matching the type of object that you have and the presumed valuation around that object. And yeah, will the seller make money? Will the auction house make money? We live in a capitalist system. So there you go. Now back to focusing on the listed artist piece. Since I work with art of the African diaspora, that's my primary area of specialization, sometimes a lot of those artists are not listed. They're not listed on askart.com. They're not listed on liveauctioneers.com. So what do you do then? Well, that's when you really do need someone who is specialized in that area to work with you. Many of those artists, people I know and love, friends and collaborators, are selling. They have a market. It is local. It is regional, national, even international. But their name doesn't appear on these established, credentialed platforms. Doesn't mean that their work is not valuable. It just means that they're at a different market level, different market layer, okay? And there is an argument to be made for the valuation of their works. So that is when you really do need the assistance of an an art advisor or an appraiser to work with you on those artists. And, for many years, that was the case for a lot of Black artists internationally. It's improving, but there's still a ways to go. Okay? So, do not feel disheartened by that. One of the things that an art appraiser or an art advisor can do in that respect is provide like a summary of the market for that artist's work. And, we can come up with exact prices or we can come up with a range of prices for their work. But you should know that that is something that we can give you. And it gives you like a blueprint, gives you guideposts and a pathway towards sales. And I think, that information is very powerful and empowering. And you want to position yourself as a knowledgeable collector about that artist's art market. Okay? All right. Now, one thing we cannot do, and it comes up often enough, is authenticate. Appraisers do not authenticate. I don't even know that art advisors can authenticate unless they are the identified specialist in that artist's work. And to be honest with you, you talk about an identified specialist, I go straight to the art historians. I do not hesitate. I find out who is the big dog with that artist's work, and I go to that person. Okay? I've sold like Clementine Hunters at work, and I talk to the auction house, and they're like, okay, yeah, we got the person who can authenticate this work to make sure that, this is the real thing. So, excuse my little perspiration right there. Getting hotter in the afternoon here in the tropics. But yes, art appraisers do not authenticate. And I don't think art advisors should authenticate as well. Get the recognized specialist, to do that. Better yet, if there's a catalog raisonné of the artist's work, too, to back up things. So also with that in mind, when the art professional is taking on a project like this, it's important that they have expertise in that area, that category of art, or in that particular artist's work, right? Whether you're wearing the hat of an art advisor or wearing the hat of an appraiser, that you have to have, you have to know about that artist's market. And if you don't know about that artist's market, you need to be willing to get up to speed about it. Now, as an appraiser, that connects to the requirements around the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. And also, if you're working as an art advisor, they follow the guidelines of the Association of Professional Art Advisors. So to that point, it's important that those professionals that you are working with adhere to professional standards and guidelines, right? That they're not kind of coming out of left field with suggestions around valuation or market study of these artists. So that's really important, that there's a professional organization behind their practice. So you need to ask them about that. Okay? Yeah, because there's the Wild Wild West out there, but we don't have to play into that. Okay, so speaking of the Wild Wild West, I just want to very briefly address this issue around AI, where, the research can be done for you by the brilliant algorithms of our ChatGPT, our Perplexities, our Claude, our Geminis, and the lot. So, people are using AI more and more, and that's fine. But there's certain things that AI cannot do for you, okay? And for example, clearly AI is dependent on the public information that's been placed on the internet, scrubbed, okay? And then dumped to you, the end user, out of context, right? And depending on the type of prompt that you employ to get that answer. So, you can practice your prompting, and that's all fine, but recognize that this is the public information. Now, the art world is a little bit public and a little bit private, right? So art professionals have a network that they tap into. And you're not going to get that private information about the market on an artist's work on the internet, okay? That information you're going to get based on an exchange and long-term relationships that your art professionals have with the market movers, the art galleries, the dealers, etc., who are setting the market. So realize that there's limitations on what AI can do for you, and you want to get the most accurate valuation on the works. Again, you're going to be wanting to work with an art professional who can present that kind of market data to you. So AI has its limitations. I'm not saying don't use AI. I can't stop you, right? I'm not in control of what you do, but realize its limitations, okay? And that's kind of a conversation I want to have in a later video for this channel about art collectors and AI. So really important that if that's something that concerns you and other issues around your collection, building your collection, what you currently have in your collection management practices, etc., that you subscribe to this channel. Just don't be a lurker, okay? Subscribe to this channel where you'll get notifications when I put up a new video about the market and the kinds of work I'm doing as an appraiser, as an art advisor. So let me see if there's something else to kind of touch on around the selling of the work. Yeah, so I would say, as I mentioned earlier, when you're in contact with me, whether through a message on my phone or through email, that you send me as much information as you can about those works. And I did mention around the art inventory, I have a link to Artwork Archive, which is a software that helps you do an inventory of your artwork. So I'll put that in the description. And we also have a guide, the Artwork Inventory Guide, that takes you through the different steps of inventorying your artwork. Because, I know it's daunting. I still have my brother's music collection, record collection to inventory, but you really do need to get a handle on what you have. That is really one of the top 3 steps here, getting a handle on what you have. And you can really only do that if you take the time, set your calendar, set your appointment dates, and do an inventory, right? Because then you'll be able to be informed about what your collection is comprised of. And when you're talking to an art professional, give them the scope of the work. And then they'll know what they're working with and be able to give you an accurate estimate of the type of service and the cost of the service they can provide for you. So that's all doable, but I just would strongly recommend, because I'm getting these calls all the time, that you go through that inventory process. Now, that is not to say that professional couldn't do the inventory for you, but sometimes people don't have it like that. Their loved one has passed away, or they're in the process of trying to move to a different part of the coast, different part of the country, or outside of the country, and they may not have that money available, right? So I'm showing you a way that you can do it on your own. And, do as much as you can. If you can't do it all, do as much as you can so that you can be informed about what you have. So, really, that was one of the key messages I had when wanting to do this video, touching on areas in the venues where you could sell, what does it mean to have a listed artist, inventory, authentication, how an art advisor or an appraiser could be helpful in that process, and essentially what AI can help you with and what it can't help you with. So there we have it. So I'd really like to hear from you. If you're in the middle of doing this kind of work now, share your testimony. Share your testimony in the comments. Let us know where you are in the process. Like I said, I'm still inventorying my brother's record collection, and it ain't easy, and I don't spend half the amount of time that I need to, but it has to be done, because when I have a conversation with an appraiser of music, an appraiser of records, the type of records we have actually are, he's got R&B, he has reggae, and he's got an eclectic collection. I mean, he's got Bette Midler and Bing Crosby in there. It's all over the place. Handel's Messiah. He's got all kind of stuff. I want to feel like I'm contributing to the conversation based on the time spent to get ready and understand, like, here are all the various categories that are in play. When I talk to that art appraiser, I can inform their ability to give me an estimate of services, right? That's my goal. In part, that's my goal. So I will end this video now and ask you to please like, subscribe, and add your comments below. I read every comment and will respond to you. And thank you for watching my video. See you again. Bye-bye.